Imagine the weather turning on you. And I'm not talking about in a day or even an hour. I'm talking minutes. One moment, it's a mild day. The next, the entire world is freezing solid right in front of your eyes. Today, we're digging into one of history's most terrifying and least known weather events, the flash freeze.
Now that doesn't come from some sci-fi movie. That's a real eyewitness account from Illinois way back in December 1836. He's describing a storm that moved so fast it literally froze water in motion. I mean, it sounds totally impossible, right? Like some kind of tall tale passed down through the generations. But what if it wasn't? Okay, so let's dive into this mystery. You see, for almost 200 years, these stories were pretty much just written off as pioneer legends. But hidden away in dusty old records and logbooks is the scientific truth of a weather event that could literally stop you in your tracks. To the settlers who actually lived through it, it was known simply as the sudden change. After a weirdly warm December day, this dark cloud just appeared on the horizon, and what followed was a blast of Arctic air so violent and so cold that it became instantly infamous. The stories are just bone-chilling. Animals that were caught out in the open were said to have frozen solid right where they stood. One man was apparently found frozen to his horse, another kneeling down like he was trying to start a fire. Look, these pioneers were tough as nails, right? But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared them for the speed and the ferocity of this invisible attacker. So, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth do you prove a storm from way back in 1836? Well, fast forward to the 21st century, and a team of climate scientists basically became historical detectives. They set out to solve this nearly 200-year-old cold case, hunting for hard data to back up all those wild legends.
And the breakthrough came from a place nobody had really thought to look. Back in the 1800s, U.S. Army surgeons stationed at these super remote forts were actually required to keep these meticulously detailed daily weather diaries. And these old handwritten logbooks, filled with temperature, wind, all sorts of weather remarks, they held the key.
Now, thanks to this amazing project called the Climate Database Modernization Program, all those old records got digitized. And that was the game changer. For the very first time, scientists could actually map out this whole forgotten network of observers and reconstruct the storm literally hour by hour, with the level of detail those pioneers could never have even imagined. All right, so let's look at the evidence they uncovered. This is where it gets really cool. On the morning of December 20th, this map shows two completely different worlds that are about to collide. So if you look over on the left, in what's now Minnesota, it's already a bone-chilling -2 degrees Fahrenheit. But then, just a little ways east in Wisconsin, it's a pretty mild 34. That sharp black line with the triangles, that's the Arctic front, and it is just getting started.
Okay, now watch what happens just a few hours later, by 2 p.m. That front has just surged eastward with incredible speed. And we got to pause here because this is where the data just goes off the charts. Find Des Moines, Iowa on the map. The temperature there has crashed down to 0. Further south, St. Louis is down to 14. Remember, this is all happening in the middle of the afternoon with what eyewitnesses called hurricane-force winds. And, being able to reconstruct this kind of rapid, violent change is exactly why this old data is so incredibly important. It helps us understand the absolute limits of what our atmosphere can do.
By evening, the battle line is drawn, and it is stark. This map shows what meteorologists call a massive temperature gradient. Basically, a huge temperature difference over a tiny distance. It's like an invisible wall of cold. I mean, just look at Wisconsin. Over in Green Bay, it's 38 degrees. But on the other side of the same state, in Prairie du Chien, it has plummeted to -4. That is a 42-degree difference. So yeah, the sudden change wasn't just some pioneer ghost story. The data proves it was real, it was spectacular, and it was absolutely terrifying.
And then, the next morning, the aftermath. The Arctic air has completely taken over. It is now brutally cold across the entire region. Fort Snelling in Minnesota bottoms out at -22 degrees. The legends, they were all true. And now, science had the receipts to prove it.
So what in the world is this thing? What kind of meteorological beast can actually do this? Well, this wasn't just any old cold front. It has a name, and it's just as ominous as it sounds. It's called a blue northern. It's a specific, really violent type of cold front, where an extremely cold, dense Arctic air mass just slams into warm, humid air. The name actually comes from the dark, kind of bruised-looking sky that rolls in ahead of it. You see, it doesn't just push the warm air out of the way. It crashes underneath it like a tidal wave. The key thing to understand here is the speed. It's all about the speed. In Des Moines, the temperature fell 34 degrees in only 7 hours. That's a rate of almost 5 degrees an hour. That is definitely fast enough to catch anyone off guard. But, and you're not going to believe this, the sudden change of 1836 wasn't even the craziest one on record.
Okay, so let's fast forward 75 years to a really specific date, November 11th, 1911. Because on this day, a blue norther hit that was so powerful, so completely bizarre, that it still holds records for just being, well, meteorologically absurd.
Look, saying the weather changed on that day is the understatement of the century. It was more like all the rules of weather just got tossed right out the window for 24 hours. The day started with people enjoying summer-like heat and ended in a frozen, storm-ravaged wasteland.
Let's just take one city as an example, Springfield, Missouri. The afternoon high hit a record-breaking 80 degrees. People were out in short sleeves, for crying out loud. By midnight, the temperature had plunged to a record-breaking low of 13 degrees. Think about that. It's one of the only days in American history where the very same city set both its all-time record high and all-time record low for the same calendar day.
That is a 67-degree drop. Just let that sink in for a second. That is a mind-blowing change in the air mass.
And the speed? Oh, the speed was even more insane than in 1836. This 67-degree plunge happened in just 10 hours. Get this, one account says the temperature dropped 40 degrees in just 15 minutes.
Okay, and this is where the story just goes from wild to completely bonkers. Because this wasn't just a cold front. On that single day, the Midwest experienced record heat, a deadly tornado outbreak, including an F4 twister in Wisconsin, destructive hurricane-force winds, a dust storm, and then, to top it all off, a full-blown blizzard that dumped a foot of snow on the tornado's wreckage. It was 4 seasons of catastrophic weather in less than 24 hours.
You know, these stories aren't just weird weather facts. For people living back in 1836 or 1911 with no weather apps, no instant communication, no advanced warnings, these storms were literal killers. The shock to the system for both people and animals was just devastating.
So when we put these two monster storms side by side, you can really see how the 1911 event was just a whole different level of violent and complex. The temperature drop was way more severe, and throwing a major tornado outbreak into the mix made it far deadlier. But in both cases, the real danger was the shock. It was being caught totally, completely unprepared for a sudden, life-threatening plunge into deep winter.
So why does any of this matter today? Well, looking back at these storms isn't just a history lesson. It's a really stark reminder of the atmosphere's raw power. But more importantly, it shows us the incredible value of data. The painstaking records from those army surgeons, brought to life by modern science, don't just solve a historical mystery. They give us these crucial benchmarks for our current climate models, helping us understand the potential for future extreme events. They gave us the gift of perspective, the ability to scientifically grasp what our ancestors could only describe as, an act of God.
But this all leaves us with one last kind of sobering thought. We've got satellites and radar and supercomputers. We get alerts right on our phones. But these historical events show us the absolute extremes our weather is capable of. With all our modern conveniences, have we maybe gotten a little too comfortable, a little too complacent? Have we forgotten just how quickly and how violently the weather can still break? What would happen if a true sudden change struck one of our cities today?